Hello, welcome to Data Exposure, the podcast for data risk leaders, brought to you by Exterro. I'm Mike Hamilton. A legal hold breaks down, a cyber investigation escalates, a new technology walks in and challenges the way you've always done the work. In every one of these moments, the pressure to act immediately can drown out the need to act wisely. And for a data risk leader, that difference can decide whether a problem gets contained or gets a whole lot bigger. My guest today has spent nearly 2 decades living in these exact moments. Tom Mullane is Associate Director of eDiscovery and Cyber Investigations at RTX, with a career spanning information governance, eDiscovery, privacy, and legal technology. He's the person in the room when everyone else wants to hit the panic button. We're going to talk about how you stay measured when the stakes are high, how you tell real urgency from the manufactured kind, and how you challenge this is how we've always done it, including all the noise around AI without creating new risk in the process. Hey, Tom, welcome to Data Exposure. Thank you for joining us here today.
Hey, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
It's funny. Tom and I were talking before this, and we've known each other for 15 years. So I think in eDiscovery years, that puts us as really old senior citizens.
Yeah. Back when nobody knew what they were doing, everybody was trying to figure it out.
Well, that's a great segue, Tom, to my first question. I don't think anyone grew up, I know I didn't, and say, I want to run eDiscovery and cyber investigations. What was your path? And was there a moment you realized this was the career and not just a job?
Yeah, definitely. My path, well, going way back, I was always like a history economics guy, like a liberal arts guy in college, like that stuff, like the idea of precedent and that kind of thing, but ended up going into IT and building a career in IT up until around 2005 when somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we're going to bring eDiscovery in-house and we think that you might be a good fit for that. And that's really cool. What the hell is eDiscovery? I had a lot of learning to do. I think I read for the first 2 or 3 months on the job just to kind of bring all that up and figure it out. And it was really like, we need you to come in and stand this up and make this thing. And then it's just going to kind of run and that's going to be good. And I'm thinking, all right, so I'll go do this and maybe I'll go do something else. And I think if you're looking for sort of a moment in time when I was like, could be a place where I could stay and kind of make a home. I think I would trace that back to a meeting at Morgan Lewis with a bunch, sort of like a little meet and greet thing, bunch of other eDiscovery people from some large organizations, and realizing that everybody was right at the beginning of this thing, that it was really, that this is just the tip of the iceberg, a lot of runway here, and that being impacted by changes in the law as the courts figured things out and set precedent, built some case law, it changes in the technology in terms of how people store and use data, and then also technology and the tools of how people were going to be able to actually do eDiscovery. That between these three things, that there was always something that was going to be changing, and this was going to take a long time to unravel. So at that point, I was like, all right, I'm going to be here for a while, and I may as well dig in and try to get it as good at it as I can.
And now you sit at a place. This podcast is called Data Exposure because it's for data risk leaders. Back then, 2005, it was more of a litigation support type of job, I would imagine. How did you evolve as the profession started to grow, change, get bigger?
Well, I think it became starting out as trying to figure out how to handle it, how to get data, right? How to gather data. And as you began to realize that not a lot of people really had a lot of education in this, and that a lot of outside counsel that came in wanted to do things their own way, and that there were going to be problems in standardizing and creating something that was repeatable and defensible, and that there sort of needed to be a focal point, a center of information, center of excellence, if you will, who can really kind of quarterback all that and pull it all together. That's a kind of a tall order for me at the time. It still is, because I'm not a lawyer. I can't just whip out my JD. I have to build my credentials in other ways in terms of just credibility in the organization. But having support at high levels within your organization, if you're in a position that I'm in, is tremendously helpful. But trying to centralize the knowledge and centralize the process and building that out was when all those things are going to come together and you're going to have to build that into something.
I want to touch on something that you just referenced, credibility. You've been in this industry for a long time. How did you go about building that credibility?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And really, what it has to do, for me, most of the credibility that I build is number one, certifications are helpful, benchmarking with peers, a heavy interaction with peers, getting to know people at conferences and wherever else, reading the case law. Everybody puts out a case law digest, even if it's the same case. Maybe Exterro releases something and maybe Shook has a different take on it. Morgan Lewis says something else, but keep digesting all of that stuff so that either you can say, Mr. Attorney, I know you're saying this, but you really ought to look at this because this is a case that might align with what with the direction that you should not be going in, and maybe you want to turn around, things like that. But I think really sort of knowing what the tools are, knowing what the data sources are, knowing what the case law is, and having the answers when you're on a call or in a meeting, and eventually getting it turned around to the point where people are coming to you for an opinion and saying, we think we're going to do this. Is there any reason why we shouldn't?
And Tom, he's spoken at Exterro's user conference. I don't even know how many times, Tom. I'm thinking 5 or 6 times.
Quite possible.
I know you're on. Yeah, and I know you've spoken numerous times at the eDiscovery Institute's conference. You're a thought leader. You really built out and really worked on honing that credibility, which in networking, I mean, you should see Tom at some of these events. He knows everyone. That's really great advice that I've seen Tom put into action. One thing I do want to kind of have you compare and contrast is when you first started in eDiscovery, everything probably is in most cases in some organizations is a fire drill. Everything's on fire. Everyone's wanting an answer. Everyone probably thinks, hey, just go out and collect that. That's easy, even though it might be structured data or somewhere in the cloud or something that you can't easily get to. What did that pressure actually feel like? And how has your relationship to that feeling changed over the last 15, 20 years?
That's a good question. Everything starts out as a fire drill. It's evolution, learning from an IT mindset to go work with folks on the legal side. At the risk of making enemies, I'll say, I don't think that there's any other profession that I can think of that rewards procrastination like the legal profession, because something could always settle. Something's going to change, right? So lawyers, good lawyers, eventually figure out that they need to know stuff, but they don't really want to do too much work out ahead of something because the rules are going to change. Something is going to change, something's going to settle, something's going to go away, or they're going to get some other demand letter. From an IT perspective, where you want to be prepared, and if you're, especially on the security side, where your preparation, proactivity, and everything else, to come at it from that mindset and understand that you've got to dial that back. You've got to be prepared for what might happen in terms of mental preparedness and thinking about it. But to go and do a bunch of work out ahead of something that may or may not happen is definitely a path to sadness. And wasted time. So learning that when there's a fire drill, assessing what's really the problem. Do we need to evacuate the building, or is it really just a garbage can that we need to go shoot it with a fire extinguisher? What really is the problem? And what do we need to do right now to make it better? And focus on kind of baby stepping the thing. And okay, we're supposed to do this giant eDiscovery project for this, that, and the other thing. What do we need to do today? What do we need to do by the end of the week? And is that realistic? And if it's not, how can we adjust that? How can we help our attorneys or our coworkers or outside counsel make a case that what is being asked for is not realistic, and maybe what is realistic out of that? I think really kind of taking it apart when you have a fire drill and remaining calm and trying to figure out what is the emergency. Is the place burning to the ground, or we just have like a turkey that's burning in the oven? What's the problem?
That's a really good point around real urgency versus manufactured urgency. And what I kind of deciphered from your answer was that collaboration, that transparency. Is that how you kind of came to tell those things apart in your experience?
I think you have to understand what you're working on. Prioritize it. It sort of speaks to prioritization. How do you spend your time? Is the emergency a class action lawsuit? Is it a government subpoena? Is it some sort of patent case where one of your key pieces of technology is being challenged? Well, you're going to sit up and pay attention to that, because that's something that you need to prioritize. If it's a smaller matter, you certainly can't ignore anything, but you're maybe going to figure out maybe the bar is a little bit lower on where you need to get something that's reasonable and how you're going to approach it. But to me, it's a lot of it is qualifying what the matters you're working on. Because almost anybody in this is going to work on everything from massive stuff that's significant litigation to small stuff. I also think that if you've got outside counsel involved, or if the attorney internally that you're working with is very focused on their project, it's the most important thing in the world to them. And you have to step back from that and say, what's the most important thing in the world to the business? And tying back to, these are the things that I'm working on. What are the ones that impact the business the most? And prioritize along that, again, with no case left behind.
And I'm guessing some of those conversations are tough conversations to have with some of those attorneys, with outside counsel. How do you go about having those conversations and creating that transparency across the business?
Yeah, I think that's everybody wants to be told their kid is ugly. So really a great deal of tact. And again, it goes back to what you can do instead of saying you don't matter, Mike. But it's like I don't have a lot of time. This is what I can do for you today. Perhaps they certainly don't want to hear that something else is more important, but just this. There are other constraints on my time, and I realize this is important to you. It's important to me as well. Here's what I can do today. Again, here's what I can do tomorrow, and where we're going to be in a week. Try to figure out what you can do and set an expectation rather than go, hey, man, I just don't have time for you.
So context is king.
Yeah, I think so. Without a racket stack, again, nobody wants to be told that their stuff is not important. Because it is part of that.
Speaking about legal, it's a slow-moving field. I think we both can say that sometimes it doesn't innovate as fast as other industries. In that phrase of, this is how we've always done it, precedence, business judgment, all those things come into play in the legal profession. How do you tell when it's time to question how we've always done it? And how do you bring that up? How do you issue spot that, Tom?
I think you have to be wary of that every day. And I know you're kind of blaming legal, but there's plenty of that in any organization. The change is not something people get comfortable with. But I do think that, again, the change is driven by the case law, which, as you say, it's slow. It's a building process. Something built on top of something else. By nature, it's slow. You have to accept that. By contrast, though, technology on the other side, particularly the tools that we have now to do eDiscovery, the tools that have been built, and look at what Exterro was 15 years ago versus what it is now. And some of the other products, relativity, all these big data products, the AI stuff that's now coming to bear. That's some fast-moving stuff. And I think that you don't necessarily have to argue with this is the way we've always done it. You can nuance down on it. Say, we're going to kind of do it the way we did it, but we're going to add something. And, I look at things like predictive coding and how that was that was going to be it, right? And 10 years ago, 10?
Yeah.
But that was it. And I think that largely flopped because of its name. If that had been like review prioritization, which is really what it is, or something like that, that would have been a different story. But predictive coding was a scary name. So where I'm going with that is I think that how you present that change so that you freak people out. And these aren't stupid people. They're smart. It's just presenting it in a language they can understand and really present it to them on their own terms, I guess as well. So,
Tom, we talked about predictive coding. And I was thinking, really, eDiscovery professionals were kind of at the forefront of AI. If you really think about it, we were pushing for this, or some of us were pushing for this 10, 12 years ago, and now it's really hit the mainstream. Let's talk about AI in its current form. And there seems to be a lot of tension right now around AI and what it can do, what it shouldn't do. As a practitioner, you've seen a lot of hype cycles, as you've noted. How do you personally decide what's real and what's noise when it comes to modern AI?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple ways to interpret that question. What's a real tool that really works versus maybe what's real content versus a hallucination coming out of AI? I'll start by saying I think that we're at the golden age of AI right now. That the tools are okay, they could be better, but in terms of the content that AI has been built on, what it's ingested, that's been sort of like real content created by human beings, whether it's movies or the entire internet, and now apparently ripping through books and reading books and then destroying them, but taking that information in as well. So it's all human created stuff, but at the same time, generative AI is starting to create its own content, whether it's Facebook posts or stuff on the internet, articles, whatever. And AI is going to literally start breathing in its own exhaust and taking in its own content and learning on that. If the content is bad, if it's hallucinations, then that's going to dilute the quality and the purity of the AI by just ingesting garbage and turning it into more garbage. And obviously, there's been a couple of people who have tested that by seeding like fake reports and things like that, and all of a sudden they're showing up cited in articles. So I think right now the quality in terms of generative AI may be as good as we see it. I have a very large mistrust for AI going forward. I'm really worried about how it is going to be able to separate fact from fiction as it creates things going forward. That said, in terms of what AI can do in terms of cutting through garbage and giving it hundreds and hundreds of documents and asking it, keep confining it and saying, based on this, give me information out of that. I think the quality there is going to be very good, and I think that is only going to get better. So I think in terms of what it can do for you to give you information, making order out of chaos, taking a big thing and making it a sentence is tremendous. But if you're looking for it to create on your behalf, I think you need to be very, very careful where you draw the boundaries, and increasingly so going forward.
In your perfect world, the AI would be quarantined to a set of documents or data where it couldn't live outside of that to bring in false data or hallucinations.
Yeah, I think you could tell it that in the world of regulated entities and privacy and export control and things like that, the data is somewhere where it's sort of segregated. But I think you really have to be clear on your instructions and what you're asking the AI to do. You're saying, based on this, I'll give you an example. I had an email recently that was one of those emails that you get copied on after it's gone through like 30 people and there's all this stuff in there and everybody's trying to get their arms around it. And I took the whole thing and dumped it into Copilot and said, based on this email, what are the action items for anybody on the email? And it came back, and that to me would be in a very effective, although very simplistic as well, use of AI. But saying, tell me about this thing, write me a paper based on everything you see in the internet, that's fraught with peril.
Yeah. In the example you gave, to me, lends itself to an eDiscovery context pretty well. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
And so what are those areas within eDiscovery where you're excited about AI?
I think really, in terms of excited, I think automating, I think there's a lot of runway. Again, pulling back instead of looking at how I can do my job better, but how AI can help the business and the company and the profession better. I'd love to see the AI just take the complaint, give it the complaint and say, based on this, go look at all the email that is here. Go look at all this, that, confine it again. And based on this complaint, tell me if this complaint has any legs or if this accusation has any legs. Tell me if we have this. Tell me if we're in a lot of trouble. Tell me if we're not. Give me the top 10 documents to read that are really, relevant to this. So I think if you're going to back it off to that point, who are the custodians that I should put on hold for this? Are there SharePoint sites that I should go? I think in terms of looking at the data in aggregate and focusing in on stuff that can really help you do your job, I think that really could be extremely effective. You could kind of leapfrog across a lot of the process.
And I think the point that you're touching on is, and we talk about this a little bit at Exterro, there's a lot of AI that just does talking. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer, right? It could be about anything. It could be why did person do X? And then it formulates us the answer based on a whole lot of different data. I think what you're talking about is like, how can AI do the work, meaning some of the busy work, some of the administrative work that helps
Yeah.
progress the project forward a little faster? Talk to me about the tension points or the inflection points. Let's say you had that AI that could help you ingest a complaint, identify who the responsive custodians are, maybe send out a legal hold, place some of that data on legal hold by either preservation, collection, and then give you, let's say, 10 to 20 hot documents that they feel is most relevant. What are the guardrails that you would want in place that would make you feel
Yeah.
comfortable with AI doing that? Would there be checks and balances along the way? Would there be explainability throughout how the AI came to its decision making? What are those checks and balances for you, Tom?
Yeah, I think that in terms of checks and balances, obviously that's the name of the game with
Mhm.
AI, especially at this stage, is making sure that ask any lawyer that's submitted a brief with a fake citation in it about checks and balances and the importance of human review and double checking things. But I think you could also help yourself do that by saying to the AI, okay, you've selected these 10 custodians. Can you tell me why you selected these? And then review that, right? Okay, Mike Hamilton is our guy on this hold. What led to that determination? And then of course, talking to Mike Hamilton, you're identified as the guy, and who else is there for this hold, and just kind of double checking that. And we think that you have these documents, these emails, because we know that the AI has identified those. We know that you have this stuff. Does that seem right to you? Is there other things? And do I think you need to talk to every single person? Maybe not, but I think you have to have some quality control around that. Somebody's got to be making sure that the AI is doing the right thing. If for no other reason, for just for the optics of the whole thing, it's you kind of let the AI just run it, and that was it. So yeah, I do think you need some guardrails, some human guardrails. You've got to figure out what are appropriate, where you want to apply them. But I don't think it's too hard to apply them, and I think you can have the AI help build them even for you.
Another question I have for you, Tom, is around, I think something you touched on is AI in an open box. For me, when ChatGPT, all these Claude came out, you could ask it anything and you didn't really know what you could do with it. So for eDiscovery professionals, and I know I needed this, would it be helpful to have AI that is templatized, right? That's almost like a workflow, a set use case that it asks you, it prompts you with these questions that the user can see where it needs to go rather than kind of thinking in the back of their head, well, I really am curious about this. Can AI do this for me? How much
Yeah.
of a prescriptive path do you think we need to put professionals on so they use AI responsibly and effectively?
Yeah, it's funny. I think on one side of my brain is going repeatable, defensible, and that's leading to a templatized or agentic sort of approach to using AI. And then the other side of my brain is reminding me that I just tried to fill out an online insurance quote form, and like none of the fields are right. The information wasn't there, and it was completely useless to me. I think that there's some room for templatization and certainly standardization of some sort, but I do think that the having enough flexibility in that approach to make sure you're getting the answers you want and you're not limited in your professional activities to try to get things done by the construct of whatever you've made to drive this forward. So somewhere there's sanity where there is enough construction for repeatable, defensible, but enough flexibility to take on almost anything and give meaningful answers.
We had another guest. He was just on a couple weeks ago. His name was Andy Hansel. He was director counsel at Target. And he brought up a really interesting point that I want to pass by you and get your thoughts on. So his thoughts around AI is we're going into an AI arms race. And he looked at it from a plaintiff's attorney perspective. That serial litigation is going to become a lot more prevalent. The complaints are going to be coming a lot more fast, a lot more furious. It's going to be hard for the in-house legal departments and law firms to keep up with the amount
Yeah.
of litigation that could come from leveraging AI to automate and streamline how you file a lawsuit. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? And if you do, how would you, if you were looking in your magic 8 ball in the next 5 years or so, how would you go about protecting an organization from a large increase in litigation?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And my perspective is different than Andy's on that, simply because he's a consumer, right? They're a consumer product company where they're going to have a lot of that. They got a gazillion employees, very transactional employee base. They've got a lot of customers that are human beings that are in their stores, real estate. They've got all kinds of stuff. And so they're going to have those transactional sort of things. My experience has been different where there's very few customers. There's no customer data. There's no product liability is definitely not of a serial nature. My experience in aerospace is that it's a problem with an engine potentially, or an alleged problem with an engine, God help me. But that sort of thing where contract disputes and intellectual property disputes. So it's definitely a different perspective, and I can see that where that would be a problem for him, and potentially employee matters are always a thing, right? You see, it's almost now you wait until you get a DSARS request from somebody who was just terminated, and you go, well, that's probably a reason to issue a legal hold because they're not asking for fun, and so I think that it does open the door to that, to the potential where people who whether it's individuals or whatever can start saying, what are my avenues of attack here, or how can I litigate? Can I make some money off of this? So I think it really depends on what industry you're in, but I certainly see Andy's point, and I would be very concerned if I was him.
We're running out of time here, but you're one of the most seasoned professionals in eDiscovery that I've met. You've been in the industry for a really long time, Tom. You know your stuff inside and out. One question I want to ask you is around just how you kept your sanity. I think a lot of people in this industry, not to say that it's more stressful than others, but it's like we've talked about, it's continuously changing. Is there some technique or something personal that you do that's like, okay, I take 10 deep breaths and then I come back and I look at my computer? Are there any things that you do that's unique that could help out other people that are in your position?
It's a good question. I think the discipline requires a person of a certain temperament who is not a fire alarm puller, right? And so I think that my demeanor has served me well, in just that I'm not someone who's I'm pretty calm when things are going sideways. So that's helpful. And I think in terms of staying calm, it's always about, okay, we've got this big problem. Everybody's running around. Like, what can we do right now that we can make some inroads, and try to, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, figure out what bites you can take now that'll move it forward, instead of backing up and looking at the enormity of the thing and going, this is just incredible. How are we ever going to do this? So a measured approach and calm demeanor. Don't obsess. So when you're done, take some time to get away from it, but to the extent that you can, but keep your head, I guess, is where I would say.
That old saying, one step at a time, or baby steps, right?
Baby steps. Yeah. Yep.
Well, last question after you, Tom. What advice would you give to people that are looking to make a career out of eDiscovery or somewhere in the data risk field? What can they do to see the success that you've had, and how can they build on that?
That's a really tough question, because I think that the potential for AI to change this field so rapidly in the next few years am I going to even exist in 3 years, right? Is my position gone? Do we not need someone who's going to sort of, marriage counsel between counsel and the data people, and try to figure out where things are? And a lot of what my position is trying to look at the data, look at the matter, and, consult on a path. And I think that may be drying up. So I think in terms of somebody who wanted to get into this and learn about it and do it, certainly read a lot, read about case law, take some legal classes, learn about IT, try to listen a lot, and go to a lot of conferences, listen to a lot of smart people talk, read a lot on the internet. But in terms of what the profession's going to look like in the future, that's anybody's call. It's blue sky.
Well, Tom, you've talked on a variety of different panels at different conferences. And I think as professionals, we kind of get stuck in, okay, I'm doing my work, head down. I'm just going to do what's asked of me to get things done. Going to conferences can be tough for some people. And I think hearing that is great advice. What are some conferences that you would suggest to our listeners that you think you get a ton of value? It's really easy to meet people.
Yeah.
What are those conferences that stand out to you?
Well, I of course would probably be kicked off the podcast if I didn't start by saying the Exterro conference, which is good. I think it's, to me, the Exterro conference is a very good practitioner level conference, right? It's not, some conferences are very, very heavy lawyer based, and pontificating about the fine points of the law and other stuff. I think the Exterro conference is sort of, it's more, more trenches level, right? Certainly the legal element is there, but it's operations and it's a little bit more on the IT side. So I think that's a pretty good one for someone who's doing a little bit of both. I love EDI. I'll do stuff with the eDiscovery Institute. I think their stuff is really, really good, very focused on connecting people and helping people build networks, which is what is a big part of being successful in this business. The Solid is great. David Cowan's stuff is really, really good. A lot of energy there, a lot of never the same format twice, a lot of changes, very interesting. And I think that I didn't go to Georgetown for a number of years, but I went last year, and I think that there's been a lot of new life breathed into the Georgetown conference, and I really enjoyed that. For me, I really like to focus on eDiscovery based stuff, and I think that's sort of, it leads me in that direction. I think if you were more like a legal ops type person, or you were looking to maybe grow out of eDiscovery or expand, then you start to look at ILTA and things like that to try to get more into the legal ops side. But those are sort of a few of my favorites.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Always
My pleasure.
engaging, and really enjoyed talking with you again.
Same here. Good to talk to you, Mike.
Well, thanks, Tom.
Take care.
This is exactly the kind of steady, been there thinking this show's for. If there's one thing I'm holding on to, it's that first reaction in the room is usually the wrong one. And that staying measured isn't about being slow. It's refusing to let manufactured urgency make the decision for you. Thanks for listening to Data Exposure, brought to you by Exterro. If this episode was useful, follow the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and pass it along to someone in your legal, security, or data team who could use a calmer head in harder moments. You'll find every episode at exterro.com/resources/inside data exposure. I'm Mike Hamilton. We'll see you next time.